Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. If 20-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here on my channel and over on my Instagram. Before we kick off this week's episode, I have a very special announcement to make. If you saw my community tab post about this, then you already know, but I made my television-ish debut on Friday. I hinted to it back in May, but it's official now. I crashed the Atlanta-based music series Now Dig This. This is kind of a weird full circle moment for me. I first heard of the Knee Highs, the group I get to introduce on the episode. I first heard of them through their debut appearance on Now Dig This. So to make my series debut introducing them, it's kind of perfect. If you didn't catch the episode live, that's okay. It's up on their YouTube channel right now. I have it linked in my description. Thank you so much, Now Dig This, for letting me be a part of your show. Okay, gushing over. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. This week's album is Harvest by Neil Young. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints for what next week's album is going to be, along with big announcements like me being on Now Dig This and being in other places that isn't here. Okay, let's take the plastic off. So let's talk about this cover art. The design is by Tom Wilkes. He also designed for The Rolling Stones' Beggar's Banquet, Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I never get to pull this record out. Super happy that it's relevant this week. He also photographed Janis Joplin for what would become the Pearl album art. Opening up the Harvest gatefold, we have a photo by Joel Bernstein. Now, I always thought that this was a photo taken with a fisheye lens. It definitely mimics the fisheye effect. However, this is actually a photo of Neil taken in the reflection of a doorknob on Broken Arrow Ranch. That's like the coolest thing ever to me. And on the back, we have a photo of the stray gators playing inside Neil's barn. Now, Neil originally wanted a biodegradable jacket for Harvest. Reprise said, hell no, that is way too expensive, so they popped Harvest in the standard cardboard. I guess in some roundabout way, Neil got his wish because my copy is falling apart. It is returning to the earth. On Harvest, we of course have Neil Young on vocals, guitar, harmonica, piano, and acting as principal songwriter. He plays with the Stray Gators, Ben Keith on steel guitar, Tim Drummond on bass, and Kenny Buttrey on drums. We also have Jack Nitzsche, a familiar name in the Vinyl Monday canon, playing steel guitar, piano, and doing the orchestral arrangements. Those arrangements were played by the London Symphony Orchestra on A Man Needs a Maid and There's a World. We have lots of special guests on this one. We have James Taylor playing banjo. He does backing vocals on Heart of Gold and Old Man with Linda Ronstadt. We also have the entirety of Crosby, Stills and Nash on this record. Hi, we haven't seen you around these parts in a while. David Crosby provides backing vocals on Are You Ready for the Country and Alabama, Stephen Stills for Alabama and Words, and Graham Nash for Are You Ready and Words. Hilarious to me that all four of these guys couldn't be present on one track. Ugh, lots of big personalities, I don't blame them. All tracks were produced by Neil Young with Elliot Mazer, except for The Needle and the Damage Done, produced by Henry Louis, and A Man Needs a Maid and There's a World, both produced by Jack Nitzsche. Roll transition. What's going on in Neil Young's life in 1971? Well, a lot. We have After the Gold Rush out the year before. This record's commercial success due in part to the over-the-top blowout success of CSNY's Deja Vu. This really caught Neil off guard. It was in direct contrast to how critics felt about this thing upon release. Give it 5 years and it's considered one of the classics of Neil's career, but right now, reception is pretty lukewarm. Surrounding After the Gold Rush, Neil and wife number 1 divorce. He moves out to the country, buys Broken Arrow Ranch for something like 2.7 mil in today's money, and he finds that playing cowboy can only ease the pain of a failed marriage for so long. That is, until he goes to the movie theater one day, sees Carrie Snodgrass on the screen, and decides on the spot that she's his new muse. A Man Needs a Maid is partly inspired by Carrie, as are quite a few other works from this period of his discography. See the album Homegrown, an entire album about their eventual breakup. In early 71, Neil was booked on The Johnny Cash Show the same night as some of his Laurel Canyon buddies, James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt. Before production even began, really, he had those two on board for whatever his next album was gonna be. Neil was absolutely flying by the seat of his pants. The Needle and the Damage Done was the first song recorded for Harvest at UCLA back in January. Harvest starts to take shape in earnest, though, when Elliot Mazer takes Neil out to either a very late dinner or a very early breakfast, kind of depends on who you ask, while in Nashville for the Johnny Cash Show, in what I can only imagine was either very late night or very early morning delirium. Elliot goes, "Hey, I just opened a new studio in town, top-of-the-line quadraphonic technology. What do you say you record your next album here?" And Neil goes, "Yeah, sure, how soon can we start? JT and Linda are in town, so I want to start, like, now." Now? Now. I still need a rhythm section, but like, now. In conversation, Neil drops the name Area Code 615. These guys were basically the Nashville equivalent of the Wrecking Crew. The problem was, it was a Saturday night, and most of the members of the 615 were all playing at clubs. So I shit you not, Elliot is out here in a panic, calling everyone he can think of, while also wandering the streets of Nashville, just looking for any stray musicians that might be in need of a job. That's how he found Tim Drummond. Clearly Kenny Buttrey and Ben Keith were the only ones sitting at home that night, twiddling their thumbs, because they were called into Quadraphonic Sound that night too. The still yet-to-be-christened Stray Gators panic slam their parts together and cut the first studio track recorded for Harvest, Old Man. JT and Linda drop by either on Sunday or Monday to record their vocals for Old Man as well as Heart of Gold. Notably absent from this party was Crazy Horse. This was a pretty tumultuous time in their history. They went off on their own for a couple albums to kind of work some things out, but it goes a little deeper than that. The song The Needle and the Damage Done is written about the devastation caused by heroin, specifically in the music industry. Neil had very personal experience with this because it was drugs that pulled apart Crazy Horse. Somewhere along the way, guitarist Danny Whitten had gotten hooked on heroin. It became a way to self-medicate the painful arthritis that would inevitably flare up. I mean, he's a guitarist. He's on his feet and using his hands all night, every night. The Crazy Horse rhythm section, Billy Talbot and Ralph Molina, fired Danny from the band sometime in '71. So instead of moving forward with an incomplete Crazy Horse, Neil decides to start from scratch and just have another band on his next record. Like the formation of the Stray Gators happened because of Neil's travels to Nashville, the recording of A Man Needs a Maid and There's a World happened because of his appearance at Royal Albert Hall. Hall. Neil hauls back out to Nashville in April to cut Out on the Weekend and the title track, as well as to keep working on Old Man. Now, during all of this, we encounter one of the most incredible, bizarre butterfly effects of rock and roll history. It starts with a song called Alabama. Neil was pissed when he wrote this, and you can tell. It's a loaded song about a lot of things, but firstly, it's a reworking of Southern Man off After the Gold Rush. Neil has a long history of activism and protest songs. It's part of the reason why I like him so much. He actually puts his money where his mouth is. Southern Man is a nudge in comparison to Alabama. A hard shove. The lyrics represent black spirituals, Reformation, state politics at the time. This song is a poignant and forceful call to action. Harvest recording resumes in the fall at Neil's Broken Arrow Ranch. The electric songs were recorded right here in Neil's barn. The PA system was acting wonky, but he actually liked it. When mixing Harvest, Elliott decided to give the whole ranch a show. Instead of heading into Neil's studio and sitting at the board like you'd normally do, the left channel was run through the PA in the barn and the right through speaker systems in his house. It was like a drive-in movie, but the movie was the album. That much of the story I'm about to tell you is certifiably true. As the story goes, they're running back an early mix of Harvest on land. Neil is in a rowboat on the lake with Graham Nash, and when asked how everything sounds, Neil replies with, "Hey! More barn!" Nash swears up and down that this happened. Neil has only ever joked about it. I personally subscribe to the More Barn story just because I really want it to be true. The track listing of Harvest goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Out on the Weekend, followed by the title track, Harvest. Then, A Man Needs a Maid. Next, Heart of Gold. And side 1 closes with Are You Ready for the Country? Opening up side 2, we have Old Man, followed by There's a World. Then, Alabama. Next, The Needle and the Damage Done, and the album closes with Words Between the Lines of Age. Harvest was released in February of 1972, with Heart of Gold as the promo single in January. It goes right to #1. This album was the best-selling album of 1972 here in the US. So remember when I said Alabama caused one of the most bizarre butterfly effects in rock and roll history? Well, Lynyrd Skynyrd caught wind of Alabama, listened to it, and if their response song is any indication, they completely missed the point of the song. Just how hard did they miss the point? I'd direct you to take a listen to the song for yourself, but it's no use, seeing as you've probably already heard the song. Yup! Sweet Home Alabama is a Neil Young diss track. Yeah, Neil totally gets why Skynyrd took a swing at him. He says Alabama was harsh, Skynyrd thought it condescending. It's all in good humor now, though. Both Skynyrd and Crazy Horse have worn each other's band t-shirts while playing their respective songs live. When it came time to tour Harvest, Neil remembered Danny Whitten. He always felt bad about how things went down with Crazy Horse and wanted to give Danny a second chance, so he called him up and asked him to be a touring member of the Stray Gators. Danny turns up to rehearsal at Neil's house looking worse for wear. He was having a hard time keeping track of the rhythm part, he couldn't keep up with the rest of the band. This very clearly wasn't gonna work. Neil came to the unfortunate conclusion that he could no longer work with Danny. As close as they were from 4 years of Crazy Horse, at the end of the day, he'd become a liability. He's fired from the Stray Gators in November. On the 18th of that month, at just 29 years old, Danny dies of an overdose. He was trying to use alcohol to wean himself off the heroin dependency. It had a bad reaction with the drugs he was taking for his arthritis. He didn't know. It took a long time, but Neil eventually processed the grief and was able to get over his guilt over Danny's death. And 51 years and change later, Harvest, the album with the song about Danny on it, is still Neil's best-selling record. Not unlike After the Gold Rush, it took critics a little while to warm up to Harvest, but once they did, it became a cornerstone of the folk genre. So, what do I think of Harvest? Right, so I know the 50th anniversary of Harvest was in February of last year, but I wasn't doing the long-form Vinyl Monday back then. I held off, and I'm covering this album now because this week I'm entering my Neil Young year. On Wednesday, if you're watching this on the day it comes out, I'll be 24. So, Harvest. What is Harvest? It's the end of the light half of the year where you collect the bounty of the season. It's reaping what you sow. Harvest, the album, is plunging into the dark half of living. At its darkest points, it stares racism, bigotry, hatred, addiction, and mortality right in the eye. It's reaping what you sow in life, whether that's loneliness, isolation, confronting society's ills, or simply confronting getting older. It's grappling what you do with the bounties of life. Take this line from the title track, for example. Will I give you more than I can take? Will I only harvest some? So let's look at Harvest through that lens, starting with Out on the Weekend. The opening line of the record, think I'll pack it in, buy me a pickup, take it down to LA. Usually people pack their shit and head to LA to chase like a dream, but the narrator here sounds like he's throwing in the towel. This is such an apathetic way of saying, oh, I'm heading to the big city, I guess. I can hear the backing vocals that should be on this song, kind of like the female vocalist did for Round and Round on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. I understand why there aren't backing vocals on this song. Opening track of the album means it's the project's thesis, and this is a solo project, so solo vocals. But still, they would have sounded nice. This song establishes one of the central themes of Harvest, the loneliness that comes with transitioning out of young adulthood. I'm doing this right now. That's like the #1 reason why Harvest is finally resonating with me after all these years. I'm living this album, this song specifically, right now. There's a profound sense of loneliness coursing through the entire record, and the seed is planted on Out on the Weekend. I used to not like A Man Needs a Maid, but I'm warming up to it. I want to point out the part about the movie where the narrator falls in love with the actress. Yes, this was a real-life moment for Neil. More than once, actually. He's married to Daryl Hannah now. The sweeping strings on A Man Needs a Maid are meant to be cinematic, of course, but when placed next to the sound of the rest of Harvest, you know, steel guitars, harmonicas, jangly saloon piano, and country vocals, we're meant to think of a Western. This magical fantasy, quintessentially American genre, the story of the wandering cowboy, is about as American cinema gets. This guy, Neil Young, did Americana better than most Americans did because he understood the nuances of the genre. The restlessness, loneliness, cynicism, subverted patriotism. Holy shit, have I cracked the code of Harvest? Heart of Gold is the lightest song on the album. It's the bright spot that Harvest so desperately needs. It's tinged with loneliness, though, about the narrator traversing far and wide for his elusive companion. At the surface level, the line, "and I'm getting old," does give me a chuckle, but then when you think of how old being perpetually single makes you feel, it starts to make sense. Like, no, I don't really go out. I don't do parties. I just kind of sit at home. I drink tea. I sew. And being famous is a lot lonelier than us common folk might think. You're surrounded by yes men, your peers are as shallow as a kiddie pool, you're flocked by groupies who love your music but don't necessarily know you. Finding true love in a world like that is a lot easier said than done. Are You Ready for the Country is a fun little country bop to round out side one. That is, until Neil goes, "It's time to die." This is about where Neil tells us he's a Scorpio without telling us he's a Scorpio. I would love to have access to this man's birth chart because that is such a 12th house Scorpio thing to say. What a way to cram the fragility of life and death into 12 lines of a song, even when we're on the front porch with our washboards and our slide guitars, we're still thinking about the inevitability of death. After the breath of fresh-ish air, that is, Are You Ready for the Country, we move on to side 2. Side 2 of Harvest is one of the darkest halves of any album I've ever covered. Old Man, There's a World, Alabama, Needle and the Damage Done, and Words. It's the dark half of the dark half. Old Man is another brief bright spot of the record with Heart of Gold. It's similar to that song in its subject matter. I live alone in a paradise that makes me think of two. And it carries the added complexity of convincing your elders you're a lot more alike than you think. Again, being perpetually single makes you feel like an old hermit. Maybe the old man is just the man in the mirror. I'm not crazy about There's a World. This is the one of the 2 orchestral tracks in which the production is in detriment to the song. It's the lone track on Harvest that I haven't warmed up to. It just feels too done up. Then, Alabama. Jesus Christ, Alabama. Hey, when Neil Young writes a song with a state's name in the title, you know it's gonna be fire! Looking at the lyrics myself, it amazes me how completely Lynyrd Skynyrd missed the point of this song. That's not to say Neil didn't miss some of the nuances of living in the South, as I'll surely miss some of those too. I'm from New England, the side you all lost to. Neil's Canadian, for God's sake. Of course this won't be a perfect examination of how intensely complicated the South is. Here's the thing about Alabama, the song. Neil dislikes it now. He thinks it's condescending. Skynyrd thought it was condescending too. And I disagree with them both. 50 plus years on, I think a song like Alabama is a necessary shaking of the shoulders. The chorus, your Cadillac has got a wheel in the ditch and a wheel on the track. This stuff can be unlearned with some serious work put in. But if the work isn't done, the car will backslide. I hate to say it, but 51 years later, we are seeing the car backslide. However, as an outsider, it's easy to write off the whole of the American South as ignorant backwards bigots. Maybe Neil is guilty of that at times here. The fact of the matter is, you can't unlearn what your ancestors taught you overnight. It's a long process. Alabama is a tough delivery, no doubt, but its deepest message is that the South isn't a lost cause. I could make a whole video just about Alabama. I practically have here. It's some of Neil's best songwriting he's ever done. It's the epitome of Harvest's thesis. You reap what you sow. Over 50 years later, The Needle and the Damage Done also carries a particular weight. Having come of age at the height of America's opioid crisis, and having gone to college in the town that is often considered the heroin capital of the state, there was never a moment where Needle didn't stop me dead in my tracks. I sing the song because I love the man. I know that some of you don't understand. Fact of the matter is, it's fucking hard to love an addict, whether you're lovers, friends, or, in my case, family. Though my story has to do with alcohol, not drugs, it's all the same thing. Every junkie's like a setting sun. It's not so much a comment on the inevitability that junkies will destroy themselves, which I don't believe, and I don't think Neil does either. It's more of a sentiment of you can't stop the sun from going down, like you can't make a horse drink. I know from experience you can't force someone to help themselves. They have to want to help themselves. Sometimes it takes some people hitting rock bottom to get there. Some people don't survive rock bottom. Danny didn't. It's also worth noting that the setting sun is right here on this album cover. We have a jarring cut from the audience at the end of Needle into words. We seem to arrive in the middle of this thing. I still don't know what to make of the lyrics. This is the most surreal, open-ended narrative on the record. Kings laughing while the unknowns scour for seeds to plant. We're unsure if the harvest, metaphorical or literal, will come. As for the music, though, that's how much I understand. An anxious, unstable waltz leaves the album's narrative open-ended. Maybe it's fitting, because these very human stories will be told over and over and over again until the end of time. What softens the blow of this heavy, heavy shit is Neil's voice. It's tender and thin and perfectly equipped to deal these songs' devastating blows. At the end of the day, Harvest is a record about the human condition as Neil sees it. He offers us up a body of work that serves us a warning. You're gonna reap what you sow, and you can't run away from that. With a message that immortal, and with music worthy of an epic delivering it, it's no wonder why Harvest remains a defining statement of Neil's career. My personal favorites on this one are Out on the Weekend, Heart of Gold, Old Man, Alabama, and The Needle and the Damage Done. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week, except for this one, for obvious reasons. And that was the last Vinyl Monday of my 23rd year on this planet. That was Harvest. What do you think of this album? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!